When I was going into my third year of the NFL, I remember sitting down with a local reporter back in Delaware. And when we started the interview, he said to me, you know, life has been pretty easy for you. You've always been the top dog at every level of sports. Now, what is it like for you to have to fight for your spot now? And I looked at him. I said, easy? My journey to the NFL has been anything but easy. I've been an underdog my whole life. Just look at the environment I grew up in. When I was 17, I watched somebody get shot in the head and die right in front of my face by a bullet that could have been meant for me for all I knew. And when I was in high school, I was playing basketball, and I went up for a dunk, and next thing you know, I woke up on the ground. I had cracked my leg in half, and it was hanging on by a tendon. I got rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery, and the doctors didn't know if I was going to be able to bounce back from this injury. But I fought through it. And in my senior year, I got over 50 scholarships to every top university in the country to play football. I ended up going to Penn State, and I was having a breakout training camp my freshman year. And during one practice, I went out there for one play, and I blew my knee out. And I ended up getting rushed to the hospital. I had doctors, coaches, and teammates telling me that a lot of people who face this type of injury don't come back from this. I ignored them. Instead, I fought my way back in rehab for a year. And I made it back that following training camp. And during the scrimmage, I was defeating one of my blocks, and somebody got thrown into the pile, and I felt my ankle snap. I got rushed to the hospital. The doctor had to put a plate and 10 screws in my leg to hold it together. I felt my world coming down. It felt like nothing was going right. And if people didn't believe in me before, they definitely didn't believe in me then. But I fought my way back from that. And in my junior year, I broke the starting lineup. In the last game of the season, I had a breakout game against Florida. And I ended up going into my senior year as a preseason All-American. And I was having one of the best years of my career. I blew my back out against Ohio State during warm-ups. And then I fought my way back from that, and I tore a rotator cuff in my left shoulder. I fought my way back from that, and then I ended up breaking my toe. But despite all of that, I still became an All-American. I still became the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. I still became the first person in my family to graduate from college. And I eventually became the 53rd overall pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. And in my second year of the NFL, I was playing against the Lions. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was going to go make a tackle against Reggie Bush, and I stuck my arm out. I remember grabbing onto his jersey. And our linebacker came full speed from behind me and put his elbow right into the back of my arm. And all I felt and heard was a big pop. And when I looked down, my arm was just dangling. I had just dislocated my elbow. In 5 weeks, I fought my way back from a dislocated elbow, just so that 2 games later, I blew out my back again against the Steelers. And I had to get season-ending back surgery. A week after getting the surgery, I flew home to be with my family. And I started getting pains in my side. And I thought it was because I was wearing the brace too tight from my back surgery, so I just decided to fight through the pain. And one day I went over to my dad's house, and the pain just became unbearable. And I laid on the living room floor, and I started to cry. And my dad walks up to me, and he tells me I need to go to the hospital. But I was so used to fighting through the pain, I told him no. And he told me, I wasn't asking you, I was telling you. So he took me to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital, the doctor started running tests on me. And they found that I had blood clots all in my lungs. And if I didn't make it to the hospital when I did, then I wouldn't have made it to the morning. So for you to say that my life has been easy, my life has been nothing but hell. He asked me, you've been through a lot, and despite all of that, you're still standing. How? And that was the first time anybody had ever asked me that question. So I didn't have a good answer for him. I just said, I don't know, I just did. Fast forward a couple months later, it's the morning of Leah's big dance recital. Everybody in the family is excited. She goes out to breakfast with her grandma. And while she goes out to breakfast, I take my wife to work. I drop her off and I start to head back to the apartment. And I get stopped at a red light. And my phone goes off. I answer the phone and it's Leah's grandma. And she tells me that Leah's not feeling good. She's not eating any of her food, that I should set up a doctor's appointment for her to find out what's going on. And it just so happened that I was right across the street from the restaurant they was at. So instead of calling her doctors, I made a U-turn and pulled up to the restaurant. I got out the car and I walked into the IHOP and I saw Leah with her head on the table. And I walk up to her and I asked her, is she okay? And she just shook her head no. So I picked her up into my arms and I took her to the car. And across the street, there was an express emergency room. And when I took her there, the doctor started running a bunch of different tests on her. And they couldn't find anything wrong. So they sent us to a children's hospital that was literally 3 minutes down the street. And when we got there, they started running all these different tests on her. They took her blood, they gave her an ultrasound, and they had found a mass in her stomach. They didn't know what it was, so they sent her upstairs to get a CAT scan. A couple hours later, the doctor came out and told me my daughter had cancer. And in that moment, I did what you would expect any big, strong, 300-pound NFL player to do. I dropped to the ground crying. Because when I heard the word cancer, all I thought about was death. And I wasn't ready to lose my daughter. And in my mind, the question that the reporter had asked me just a couple of months ago kept playing in my head. How was you able to overcome everything? And for the first time, that answer I gave to him wasn't acceptable. I had a little girl upstairs that was laying on a hospital bed that was fighting death. And she was depending on her dad to come up there with a plan that could help her beat this disease. So I had to do some soul searching. I had to find out what I was made of, what I had inside me that allowed me to overcome everything that I had been through before Leah was diagnosed. And it was two things. It was my faith in God. Because my faith in God allowed me to believe that the impossible was possible if you just trusted in Him, because everything happens for a reason. And the second thing, it was football. I didn't know it, but since I was 13, football had been conditioning my brain and teaching me lessons that I used in my life to overcome every obstacle I faced. You see, the human brain is an amazing thing. We're able to train it to think what we want to think, to do what we want to do, and believe what we want to believe. And with knowing that, I decided that I was going to go upstairs and condition my daughter to think like an athlete and teach her every lesson that I learned from football so that she can win her fight with cancer.